YouTube, what's going on? HeirofCarthage here. Thank you for being here today, and I am going to be bringing you the continuation of my Lizardmen multiplayer focus that'll be going on for roughly a week. I played some battles with the community last night. You can watch the video on demand. I'll probably make a couple of highlight videos because there were some really good, informative battles. In fact, one of those battles is informing my pick here. This is actually a quick battle match up against the Dark Elves, and just a quick introduction to my army. It is 4 Saurus, led by the Great Saurus, Gor-Rok, and then he is supported by Skink Priest, Lore of Beast, and he is rocking some Flock of Doom and some Curse of Onrair. There are 3 Skink cohorts with Javelins. I have 3 Cold One Spear Riders, 3 Feral Cold Ones, and 3 Chameleon Skinks. And I'm up against a Dark Elf force that's composed of 4 Dark Riders with repeating crossbows, 4 Dread Spears, 2 Harganeth Executioners, a Sorceress, Lore of Shadows, and she is rocking, I believe, Enfeebling Foe. Then there's going to be, I forget the names of the, I think the Pendulum, Withering, Enfeebling Foe, Occam's Mind Razor, and Pit of Shades. And then there is a Lokir Fellheart on his dragon, supported by a single Cold One Knight. So I believe the pick of the Dark Elves here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the play button, was intended that if I bring large units, that he can harass the crap out of me at range with riders. So he is packing a lot of Dark Riders with repeating crossbows. That is why I've brought the Chameleon Skinks. Chameleon Skinks are actually a really nice counter to this. And then of course I have all my cavalry units here to help support those Chameleon Skinks, or to support my infantry. My infantry will be very good against the standard variants of Dark Elves. It will be not so great against the Executioners, but the idea here is, with the support of, say, Armor Piercing from either the Feral Cold Ones or the Cold Ones, they should be able to overcome superior infantry, depending on the scenario. So the Dark Elves feel like they have a skirmish advantage. That is, until my Chameleon Skinks actually become visible here. And then the Dark Elves quickly realize that they have a problem. When you bring this type of army with the missile cavalry, you can't afford to lob missiles into units that don't matter. You only have so much ammunition, and that ammunition has to do important work. And I would give you examples here. In this army, that work would want to be done against my Cold One riders. If that damage is done to them, then the Dark Elf is in pretty good shape here because I have no answer to the dragon. Well, my Chameleon Skinks are never going to let these guys get anywhere close to the Spear Riders, and if the Dark Riders or the Dragon attempt to charge the Chameleon Skinks, they'll get poisoned, and then countercharged by my overabundance of cavalry. So basically, this is my way of being able to counter this type of play against my Lizardmen, and this was a guess. When I joined the battle, I picked the Lizardmen. My opponent, not super quick, but shortly thereafter picked Dark Elves, and so if I was just happened to guess, you know, a little poker strategy that's going on there, it's like, you know what, he probably went heavy on cavalry and missiles, much like Regina did on my stream, thinking that a lizard army won't typically come prepared for that, and so I came prepared for exactly this, and it's exactly what I found. Now, we'll find out whether or not my preparedness wins me the day, but you can see, like, these Dark Riders can't see my Chameleon Skinks. They came in for harassment, and they got shot up bad. Real bad. Chameleon Skinks, very, very good against Dark Riders with crossbows. They have no shield, and they're low armor. They get poisoned. The range, I think, favors the crossbows just by a hair, but their spotting range isn't good enough to see the Chameleon Skinks. So I'm going to look up a strategy here. My opponent's kind of in a standoff here with me. He really doesn't want to come engage me. He wants to use a ranged advantage, but at this point, I think he's trying to kind of work out how is he going to use that advantage. He had started to bring his Sorceress over to potentially do some work, but then decided against it. So I'm going to run my Chameleon Skinks continually on the flank here and kind of hopefully bait my opponent into an engagement. So I'm going to push up, and I'm going to continue to use my Chameleon Skinks. I haven't scooted any cavalry out there yet. I want his dragon or another unit to come in chasing and potentially give me some advantage. And at this point, my opponent takes some more devastating volleys to his crossbow cavalry and is forced to retreat. I don't really want to attack head-on. I can. I'm trying to force mistakes with my opponent's play here because he's the one that needs to play this more patiently. than I do. I have huge numbers of troops, and he has to kill a huge number of troops. He has some tools for doing that. The Hargoneth Executioners, just alone in combat, could cause tremendous damage to a lot of my infantry. And then his dragon can also cause tremendous damage, but he only has one cavalry unit to try and stave off what I'm going to be doing potentially with all my mobile elements. You can see here I finally do swing a cavalry unit to the flank, and then I'm going to push my chameleon skinks forward while bringing my infantry in to engage. I feel like I can win this infantry fight relatively quick in terms of the Saurus. I really want my opponent to come engage me with his dragon. So you can see this engagement happening. I'm moving my different Cold One units that I kept in reserve, and there are gaps in the line. I'm going to start trying to exploit those gaps to get some armor-piercing attacks against these Hargoneth Executioners while they're still unsupported. And then if he counters me with his own cavalry, I'll retreat through my own lines. You can see my chameleon skinks out on the flank working his cavalry here. I get a really nice charge here, disrupt his executioners, pull the attention of his cavalry. I'm going to immediately retreat. The infantry fight is going very poorly for the Dread Spears, and his Hargoneth Executioners are going to have a little bit of armor piercing going against them because of my Feral Cold Ones here. They actually do really nice armor piercing weapon damage. They're just a flimsy unit, but supported by the Saurus, it should be okay. My opponent knows he has to engage here. He wants to go for the kill, but this is why I brought Gor-Rok. Getting a kill on Gor-Rok is difficult. He is a very potent unit, and is not really easy for anybody to just quickly KO. And that goes for missiles as well as melee. Now my opponent had some cavalry that came through the lines. I quickly engaged them with my reserves, and then I'm bringing in some Cold One Spear Riders and bringing in support against Lokir, who did get some great initial damage versus Gor-Rok, but the finish won't be particularly quick or easy. And now my chameleon skinks go into a maneuver here where they're going to just go straight into the back lines, and all of his regrouping units are going to have to face chameleon skinks, just peppering them with javelin volleys and harassing them, which means that he won't really be able to regroup his army effectively. So you can see this fight going on here. His dragon is in big trouble. I have a lot of armor piercing and anti-large here, and his executioners, while good units, are now faced with overwhelming numbers and some support. And my opponent throws in the towel, doesn't think that he can win the fight, and I do believe that he really couldn't at this point. So yes, this is a good example of how you're able to get lucky sometimes, like I did here, in the sense that I played against something different, but in some ways similar last night on a stream, and I took a good guess at what my opponent's playstyle would be here. So we had killed almost half of his army, or roughly half of his army, for only a loss of a little over a tenth of my own. So this was a very efficient battle so far for my Lizardmen. And, you know, again, you get these battles where you get lucky. You can go back and watch the stream where I wasn't so lucky against Regina. I did not have the right picks there. I figured that I could fend off crossbow riders with skink cohorts with javelins, but that's actually really difficult to do. And then Regina's army, in my opinion, was a little trickier than this one in the sense that this one only had the one Cold One Dread Knight. Her army had two Cold One, or sorry, not Dread Knights, two Cold One Knights, but also had a couple of Dark Riders. And so that army was going to make it significantly more difficult for me to beat back her crossbows. And so part of the purpose in this army I brought here is that the only real good targets for crossbow riders here are my Cold One Spear Riders, but they're never going to get that chance because they have to get through the Feral Cold Ones and the Chameleon Skinks and the Javelin Skinks. So that was the idea of this build, is I'm never going to give you a chance to get at the only target in this army that's really any good for these units, and I didn't bring any dinos. I didn't put a whole bunch of cost into one target to make it easy for my opponent to get that cost back out of me from one target. And that's part of the reason why you can put 1,200 gold in Gor-Rok. It's not easy to get that gold out of him because he's hard to kill. And that was the idea. The skink, a small target that can kind of hide behind lines and move around and stuff like that. So I'm looking for small targets and well-shielded infantry like these Saurus warriors. Chameleon skinks here really come out to shine. This is, in my opinion, one of their most interesting uses here, is that when people are running that missile cavalry on the flank, chameleon skinks have really good missile resistance, and they also can't be spotted by certain units until those units are too close. And in this case, that's exactly what happened for the Dark Riders, and so my opponent was just left without a great answer here. And that happens sometimes. You make a pick, you think the pick's going to go, and sometimes it doesn't, or the flip happens here in my case. So It's a bit of a gambling game. That's part of the fun, though, of quick battle. Some people in quick battle, I think, would be pretty upset. 4 missile cavalry, wow, that stinks. I mean, you have to assume that people might do that kind of stuff. That's the unfortunate nature of quick battle, right? But even outside of quick battle, I think Regina brought 3 of them last night, and then had all the other cavalry. It's a viable tactic, and it can be a real mess if you're playing as lizards and someone does that to you and you don't come prepared. I feel like they have pretty good answers to that type of thing if you come prepared. But the Dark Elves can flip. They can play other styles too, and they could certainly come challenge you if they bring the right units to do so in their army. And so I feel like the Dark Elves are definitely a solid and complete faction, and should be able to give the Lizardmen trouble, I think, in many engagements, depending on how they're picked. But at the same time, I don't think the Lizardmen are defenseless in this matchup against the Dark Elves. Anyway, you all go down in the chat. Tell me what you think. What do you think about the Dark Elves Lizardmen matchup? Who do you like in that matchup? Who's your favorite? Are you a Dark Elf person in that matchup? Are you a Lizardmen player? Who do you think really has the edge there? Do you like how I played? Do you think my army's still vulnerable to something else? Again, would love to have you all get in the comments. That's part of the reason we want to do this. Let's share some knowledge. Let's build some knowledge as we go throughout the week. Hope you all enjoyed it. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I will see you soon.